Hello, Philip.
Hello to you.
Can you see me?
Good morning. Please go ahead, Luisa.
Great, thank you. So thanks to everyone and welcome to our TED Talk. My name is Luisa Cordova. I am the Strategic Partnership Manager at Cepei. Cepei is a data-driven Global South think tank based in Bogota, Colombia. And it is my pleasure to introduce to you today Philip Schonrock and Pedro de Alarcón. Philip is Cepei's Executive Director, and he is in person in Bern. And Pedro is Head of Big Data for Social Good and Sports Analytic at Telefónica. Today, they will share the challenges and impact of using big data to monitor natural disasters. So, using mobile calls and data traffic, Telefónica and Cepei conducted a population mobility analysis in Mocoa, a small province in Colombia during and post an avalanche. We bring you today this example of how a multi-stakeholder partnership was instrumental to bring together massive data production, the expertise of an industry leader like Telefónica, and civil society's critical analytical capacity. And without further ado, here is Philip.
Thank you, Luisa, and hi everyone from Bern. Those that could not make it, I can simply say we have a small but vivid audience in front of me, and I'm actually all alone here on stage. So it is good to be with all of you, and Pedro, hello to you as well in Madrid. And I would like to start right away. What is actually the big message that we have for today? It's that we need multi-stakeholder partnerships that remove barriers to harness the power of data. That is not a new message. We have heard it, I believe, throughout the whole World Data Forum. But on how do you actually get from being a civil society member to work with a private company and produce evidence that is useful for policymakers, it's a much different thing and a very difficult thing, as we have experienced, but also a very gratifying one when the results actually have an impact for the population. So I would like to tell you a little bit more about the region where we are from, where we work, which is Latin America and the Caribbean. Latin America and the Caribbean, unfortunately, has a very bad record in being the second region most prone in the world to natural disasters. In the last 20 years, more than 1,200 disasters have left more than 150 million victims. Storms in Cuba, Mexico and Haiti have caused 8,000 deaths and 29 million people affected. Those are numbers that are concerning, and every of these events, it's a calamity, be it the rain in the rainforest, the fires, be it the earthquakes in Haiti, or being the hurricanes in the Caribbean. And what we are seeing here is something that translates to our own country, Colombia, where we have had many natural disasters in the last years. And I would like to take you to the Colombian Amazon, which is the region of Mocoa and the Putumayo region. It is a region that it's, as Colombia being the most effective country for flooding in Latin America, we have had a lot of problems in dealing with the water resources, the difference of dealing between official and unofficial data, and the negative impacts on the multiple SDGs. And that's the story that I want to tell today, that these three factors actually are affected, and how did we, with the data that was provided to us by a telecom company like Telefónica, we could make use of it and help the population that was affected by this specific flooding. So what I wanted to tell you today, it's focusing on Mocoa. It is a town with less than 50,000 inhabitants, but it is a small community with a humid climate and also a typical of the rainforest, the Amazon. And what we're seeing here, it's people that have been already displaced due to internal violence and due to illicit crops that are being fumigated. So what people are coming, this is a reception town for many of those people, and we are also seeing that they are quite vulnerable in the access already to the basic needs that they have. So when the flooding actually came in April 2017, we received in 2 days more rain than 10 days combined during the rainy season. So the flooding actually took place, and we had fatalities that I would like to talk about in a second, because there is where actually data started to make a difference. We had, first of all, a reported of 332 fatalities, 38 wounded, and you can see the other facts that I'm presenting here. So how citizen-generated data painted a quite different picture. From 332 fatalities, we are seeing that more and 77 missing people. When we took the data that was generated by the people, we all of a sudden saw that we are still missing 1,000 persons that are still disappeared, and the triple, it's the triple of the official number. So first of all, we generated evidence to leave no one behind. That was something very important for us, and to tell the authorities that there are people still in need of help, and that we have even not counted at this moment. So the disaster had a very negative effect in the rural and urban areas, and as you can see, it also had an effect on the water services of over 70,000 people. So why this level of destruction? It is deforestation. It is, of course, the immense water that came down directly, and a bad planning for disaster management. So it had direct impacts on the SDGs, and that's something important, maybe not for the people at the right moment when they needed help, but we needed to see how to recover better forward. And that's what we saw, an opportunity to have it through an SDG lens, which actually helped us to see the impact of the disaster on the SDGs, especially on poverty, on the livelihoods, and also on the human lives and their human rights to be respected as well, and that they have actually the access to housing, to roads and public services that was needed for them. So what we did then, it's taking the data from our partners, Telefónica Tech, and seeing what can we take an advantage in actually bringing data closer together. First, we went to formalities, and unfortunately, that picture shows my haircut in the worst possible way. The whole thing, what we actually wanted to do, it's fill information gaps. That was our message to Telefónica, and we said we need your help in order to get closer to that data. So what we did, it's working together on analyzing the disaster through anonymized, aggregated analysis of mobile data. That means non-traditional data sources. This was truly not an easy exercise for us to do. It was, first of all, the legal barriers that exist in accessing private data. Also because it was a complicated red tape to facilitate or make access to data more flexible while keeping it secure. However, we were aligned and understood the possibilities that we had, so we joined forces and got those problems out of the way in order to produce data and evidence that my colleague will show now, how actually it impacted and how actually it's making sense to produce evidence for policymakers. So for us, the main message is, again, we need this kind of partnerships. We need to learn from them. And what we have done is systematizing this exercise, getting lessons learned that also Pedro will tell us a little bit about in order to see how can we do this in the future and how can we align this to the SDGs measurement in our countries. So Pedro, it is good to see you online. I hope you can hear us. And actually, it would be great now that you tell us what effects and what impact did our data have, and how a partnership between a think tank and a private telecom company, it's making a difference in Colombia and around Latin America and the Caribbean, and how we are using big data for social good. So over to you, and it's good to see you.
Thank you, Philip. Can you hear me well?
We can hear you just fine.
Yes.
Excellent. So before all, it's my pleasure. Hello, everyone, to this tech talk or to this conference. It's my pleasure to participate from Spain, and I apologize for not being in person. We still have some travel restrictions, but one of the things we had clear when we started to collaborate with Cepei is that we need these multi-stakeholder partnerships in order to succeed in the projects. The main reason for that is that organizations that have a lot of local presence are key in order to formulate the right questions. So this is about answering the right questions. And this is why we use data. Data should be the right data, but many projects that we've done in the past have failed because the questions were not properly formulated. So going into what mobile big data means, well, I think most of you are aware that mobile data is not just CDRs. Calls are just a tiny fraction of mobile traffic. This is, as we say, peanuts. The mobile internet connectivity is providing much richer information. So when we are talking about mobile data, we are talking about massive data sets. Those are, if we consider together voice traffic and data traffic, we are talking about tons of data that are complex to analyze. This is why in the telco industry, more and more we are less comfortable speaking about data. We used to talk about mobile data services because at the end, when we are supporting a natural disaster, a tragedy, or any other emergency, what we need is a service up and running that provides the answers to the right questions. So this is what we are trying to do since we started this unit within Telefonica. It's running for 5 years now. If you go please to the previous slide. So, no, previous one. One before. Yeah. So as I said, we are designing services. So data is supported through the design of services. Those services provide insights that not only are the right answers, but also guarantee data privacy. This is very important. Mobile big data is not GPS data, is not cookies or any ID data. We have anonymous data and aggregated data. So it is important and it is our responsibility as a telco company to protect our customers, our users. So this is why it's so important not to share, not to give just raw data. We need to process and keep the quality of the data, keep the precision, but reduce the risks for our customers. Also, we had some challenges in the project for the case of the Mocoa disaster. We have some other challenges that face any other telco company. First, when we are analyzing mobility in rural locations, the density of antennas is much less compared to urban locations. This means that we have less precision to analyze where people reside, where do they move, where do they stay after the disaster. So this is something we need to somehow handle with a lot of care and get the maximum out of the data. Second is about latency. Oftentimes we get the request to provide real-time data, real-time analytics. Well, simply this is not possible for some cases. So, for example, for the COVID response, we provided a latency of 24 hours. So it means that the insight is provided 24 hours after the event is actually happened. So that is important to take into account in order to position where mobile big data can help. And if we go to the next. So as I said before, mobile big data is composed by millions of events. From those events, we extract mobility matrices, origin destination matrices. I'm sure you know very well these matrices. But from these matrices, the value is to analyze what kind of variables or what kind of behaviors we can infer from those matrices. We can infer some demographics, purpose of the mobility, route, segmentation, frequency. But when we do this behavioral analysis, we need to take some or to create some assumptions and hypotheses. And sometimes it's not so easy. For example, in order to infer where a given person or given population live, we assume that where the phone line spends most of the time during the night, this is the residence of the person. But this could be false. It could be not real. And also, when we are inferring how a segment of the population moved from point A to point B, we are assuming that they use a given road, but perhaps that road was destroyed by the disaster. So we need to take care of about the assumptions we take when we don't have 100% of the information. Also, another challenge is to cross this information with statistical information, census data, for example. As we cannot use the phone lines identifiers to cross information at the level of individual, we need to use time allocation to cross information. So, for example, if I know that a number of phone lines are in a particular location for a long time, they are residents, and therefore I can assign values from the census, but it's not a one-to-one mapping. So that is also important to analyze the data. If we go to the next. So in particular, when we started to analyze this disaster along with Cepei, we formulate a number of questions. I think they are proper and right questions for the disaster. For example, which was the impact, how much population was displaced, where the disaster impacted the most, or where population did population go after the disaster. We go to the next. So here you have some of the key insights. We have much more details on that. But for example, first we analyzed the internal mobility within Mocoa, and we clearly see how the north of the city, which was much more impacted by the disaster, decreased dramatically the population, but the south increased. So we had an internal displacement within Mocoa from the north to the south. Then we observed the next 2 and 4 weeks after the disaster. So in the next 2 weeks, people move to some locations, 2 locations in particular, Pasto, what we will see in the next slide, very close to the Mocoa city, but not in the frequent pathway of travelers. They shift to a different location compared to the normality, because the usual location to travel was also affected by the rains. And also we detected a change in the profile when we observed the population after 4 weeks the disaster. So they moved to different cities compared to the first 2 weeks, which means that the population started to redistribute themselves in order to look for economic opportunities, and probably approaching to their homes, to the original homes in the short term. We also detected where the external help came from. We will see that in a minute. So if we go to the next, and then click. Can you click on the map? Yeah. So those are the main flows of travelers we detected. The majority of the people displaced to the southwest and also to the southeast. And there is a region in the middle with almost no displacement because there was mountains there. It was very difficult to move there because actually it's a difficult place to live. So most of the people who were displaced for a long time were displaced to Pasto and Puerto Caicedo, to the southwest, sorry. And then we detected how this flow were approaching Mocoa after 4 weeks closer to Mocoa. So it was like the first trend was to move far away, and they were going closer and closer as the time goes by. We go to the next. Also, we cluster the different behaviors in mobility. We create a matrix where we have the time and the people. So that heat map represents thousands of mobile lines, and darker areas are referred to people who stay in Mocoa. The vertical line represents the date of the disaster, and we identified some clusters according to their mobility. Some people stay, like cluster A, they stayed at Mocoa after the disaster, and some other people, like cluster C and D, they left Mocoa and then came back. It's interesting to see at cluster G, which represents external helpers, people who came from other cities like Bogota in order to help out the population. And we go next, just to finish. So some of the lessons we learned is that if we want to scale this pilot, these experiences to sustainable systems, we need to think about creating financially sustainable pathways for these projects. And it means considering in a very honest way the costs, the risks, and the incentives for all parties. We need to clearly see why the other is in here, what is the gain for them, and what is the cost for them to be here. And so at the end of the day, we want to convert, transform these pilots into operational systems. And finally, it's quite obvious, but we detected that it's important to keep people and to create processes along with technology. It's not just about designing a data set or designing a tool and put it there, but also having the right people with the right processes in place. I'd like to finish with the same message, the same statement. I fully support this statement because it's, I think, a key for success. Having multi-stakeholders partnerships in order to remove barriers or to lower barriers and harness this power of data. That's all on my side. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. So since we already are wrapping and going over time, for us, it is a thank you and a good afternoon to you, because we have no more time. We were just told by the organizers for the Q&A. So thank you very much, Pedro, to you as well, and colleagues in Montevideo and in DC from Bern. It's a good afternoon or a good morning to you. And thank you very much for the audience to being here with us.
Thank you.